Hello, everybody. My name is Lizzie Meister. I'm the Public Programs Manager at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience, located in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to this presentation today. And in just a moment, I will be introducing our speaker, Marina. Um, and I just want to get things started by um, sharing a little bit about this series, our Sit a Spell series, this is the first of three lectures in this free virtual summer lecture series. And we are exploring three lesser known aspects of Southern Jewish history, stories, historical figures, etc. So this is our first one, and in a moment we'll get started with it. But a week from today, same time, uh, similar Zoom room, we'll be joined by Dr. Peter Dreyer, who will be sharing on the secret life of Southern Jews in baseball. And in 2 weeks from today, we'll be joined by Dr. Nathan Rabliss to lecture on Elizabeth Brandon, the unsung hero of Cajun and Creole folklore. And so if you are interested in those two lectures, please register for them. And I'll be sharing a link for those in a follow-up email, and maybe I'll pop it in the chat as well. As I said earlier, I ask everybody to remain on mute today, and a recording of today's presentation will be made available to you. We will be doing a Q&A. Please pop your questions in the chat throughout, and I will be reading them aloud at the end, and Marina will answer them. We likely won't be able to get to everybody's question, but we'll do our best. And without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker today, Marina Delfos Harris. She hails from the island of Jamaica, and as with many Jamaicans, has a mixed heritage. Her Jamaican mother has Scottish Creole and Irish Canadian ancestry, and her father is a fourth generation Egyptian Greek from Alexandria, Egypt. She received her high school education in Jamaica and in 1987 completed a BA in International Affairs and Multinational Business at Florida State University. In 2005, Marina pursued an MA in Heritage Management at the London Metropolitan University, obtaining a distinction for her thesis, Representing Jewish Heritage in Jamaica, a case study of a museum's development. Marina worked in Jamaica's tourism industry within the hotel, attractions, and cruise sector for over 20 years. This included a tour of the 200-plus-year-old Falmouth Jewish Cemetery, offered through her walking tour Falmouth Heritage Walks, which occurred from 2011 to 2021, and used a means to keep the cemetery maintained. Her real passion lies in the preservation of Jewish Jamaican cemeteries and the information they provide in genealogical research. In 2023, Marina was awarded a fellowship by the Eccles Center at the British Library in London and spent 4 weeks there conducting research with an aim to expand the knowledge about Jewish heritage and historical places in Jamaica, in particular cemeteries and burial sites, in order to reframe dominant national and historic narratives. Although she considers herself a non-academic in this field, Marina has made presentations over the last 11 years with favorable response. 2014, Cemeteries as Material Culture, Exploring Jamaica's Jewish Sites of Memory at the Archaeological Society of Jamaica's 12th Symposium on Caribbean Archaeology, Conservation, and Material Culture. In 2017, Imagining Cemeteries as Tourism Attractions, the Jewish Cemeteries of Kingston, and at Imagine Kingston, a conference on the regeneration of the city. Her 2 virtual presentations in 2022 included a joint presentation with Tony Pickett of the Sephardic World, Finding Jews in Jamaican Archives, and a group presentation by JJCPF for American Sephardi Federation Institute of Jewish Experience New Works Wednesdays. She is a founding director of the Jamaican Jewish Cemetery Preservation Fund, a nonprofit corporation established in 2017. She became a member of Jamaica's Jewish community in 2024, the United Congregation of Israelites, and now serves on the board. Marina currently lives in the parish of St. Anne on Jamaica's north with her husband, and I would like to turn it over to Marina.
Thank you, Lizzie. Let me just start sharing. All right, thanks again, Lizzie, and good afternoon to everyone who has joined us today. Many thanks to the Museum of Southern Jewish Experience for inviting me to give this talk on Jamaica's fascinating Jewish history. And just to add a little more to Lizzie's introduction, my interest in Jamaica's Jewish heritage and history began 25 years ago. Until that point, I was totally ignorant of Jamaica's Jewish community and only then realized that I knew persons who were Jewish. I had no idea they were the oldest continuous community on the island. Jewish history was not taught in our schools, nor was there a museum that spoke to it at the time. And only a few privately published books and fewer academic ones have made mention of them. I got more involved in preserving this aspect of Jamaica's heritage back in 2011, when I began to tag along with the Caribbean Volunteer Expedition, CVE, that had started making annual week-long trips to Jamaica to record our cemeteries. This eventually led to a group of repeat volunteers forming a nonprofit registered in the US called Jamaican Jewish Cemeteries Preservation Fund, JJCPF, but more on them lately. So, who are the Jews of Jamaica? Jews have officially had a presence on the island from 1655. So here we are here, and here we are right here, just underneath Cuba. The English captured, Spain had claimed the island in 1494 when it was discovered by Christopher Columbus on his second voyage to the New World. He was even shipwrecked here in 1503 for a year. Diego Colon, son of Christopher Columbus, was recognized as the hereditary viceroy of the lands his father had seized for Spain, a title bestowed upon Columbus before his death in 1506. Diego took possession of Jamaica in 1509 and made it open for Spanish settlers. But it was when his daughter married into what would become the royal family of Portugal that Portuguese merchant settlers started to infiltrate the island a little after 1530. It's widely accepted that the Portuguese coming into the New World at this time were crypto Jews, who are essentially converted Jews known as conversos that were still practicing Judaism in secret. And perhaps this is why some academics argue that Jamaica's Jewish community is one of the oldest in the Western Hemisphere. So why Jamaica? Not only were they fleeing the Inquisition, but the Braganza Colon family apparently encouraged merchants to go to Jamaica, knowing their skills could help develop the commerce of the island. These Portuguese merchants were most likely Jews that had converted to Christianity and were known as New Christians. So these first Jews in Jamaica were Sephardim and mainly Portuguese New Christians. When England conquered Jamaica in 1655, it coincided with a petition from Rabbi Manasseh ben Israel of Amsterdam to Oliver Cromwell requesting that he readmit Jews to England who had been expelled from the British realm since 1290. This is when we see an expansion of where Jews in Jamaica originated from. Again, formerly it was mainly Portuguese that came from Amsterdam, came from Bordeaux, came from Barbados, and etc. And historic accounts tell us that a year earlier in 1654, that some came from Recife because they had been expelled there because the Portuguese took it back over from the Dutch. And they just came through Jamaica on their way to New Amsterdam, which is present-day New York City. And they set up the first organized Jewish community in America. So here's a map of Jamaica, kind of looks like a sea lion. The first official Jews, 1655 onwards, initially settled here in Port Royal on the southwest coast. It was a major trading post and was also considered the richest and wickedest city on earth. That is until 2/3 of it sunk in the 1692 earthquake. And actually, just last week, Port Royal and its sunken city have been added to UNESCO's Heritage World Site, something we've been working on for many years. So everyone's pretty excited about that. The synagogue belonging to the Spanish and Portuguese congregation was destroyed and rebuilt, and subsequently destroyed a couple more times by hurricanes over the next 2 centuries. the Port Royal Jews had established their burial ground across the harbor here at Hunts Bay. And it was the first recorded burial there is in the 1660s, but a tombstone doesn't exist for that date. After the earthquake of 1692, most of the Jewish community relocated to Spanish Town right here, and which was the capital city, and they established a second burial ground in 1696, building a synagogue there in 1703. From the early 1700s, Jews just went all over the island. They spread throughout, mainly the port towns, some inland towns. So you see them at Alligator Pond, you see them at Black River. Locovia was along one of Jamaica's longest navigable rivers, and they were exporting logwood that was used for dye. So there was quite a big enough community there. Savannah, Lamar, Lucy, Montego Bay, Falmouth. So, but what remains of these communities outside of Kingston are their burial grounds and their family names, such as Lindo, Isaacs, Samuels, Solomon, Sanguinetti, Tavares, Levy, Henriquez, Delgado, Bravo, and Hart, just to name a few. There were always a few Ashkenazim on the island, but they didn't form a community until 1788, which was known as the English and German Congregation. They initially established a synagogue and burial ground in Kingston, and then a couple years later, they did a synagogue and burial ground in Spanish Town, as it was still the capital city. So in the 1700s, there were possibly a total of 7 synagogues on the island. There would have been one in Port Royal, 2 in Spanish Town, 2 in Kingston, 1 in Savannah, Lamar, which I pointed out on the map, and 1 in Lucy. By the 1800s, there were 6 synagogues, 1 in Port Royal, 1 in Spanish Town, down from 2, 3 in Kingston, up from 1, and 1 in up from 2, and 1 in Montego Bay, which was in the west. As numbers dwindled and natural disasters destroyed synagogues, the Sephardim and Ashkenazi congregations decided to amalgamate in 1883 after the 1882 fire destroyed most of downtown Kingston, including their synagogues. This newly formed congregation was called the United Congregation of Israelites, UCI. But there were still, let me go back to that, not quite ready for Hunts Bay, but there were still persons from each congregation that held out and kept their own synagogues from 1883 until the 1907 earthquake, another one, devastating one. There were 3 separate synagogues in Kingston serving Jamaica Jewish communities. In 1921, the 2 smaller congregations finally fully merged with the UCI, worshiping in synagogue Share Shalom, located on Duke Street in the downtown area of the capital city of Kingston. So one of the first things that most of us know that a Jewish community does is to establish a cemetery. Other than our synagogue and our documents and objects held at the National Archives and Museum, it is our cemeteries that best demonstrate Jewish material culture in Jamaica. As far as our records show, there were a total of 32, maybe 33 Jewish burial grounds. 22 cemeteries were established by the Jewish communities. 3 Jewish sections were created in parochial grounds, and there were 7 to 8 private burial grounds on deceased property. And there may be more. However, only 13 of the cemeteries established by the community remain. The others have been lost to development, encroachment, even rerouting of a river, and other factors. So Hunts Bay is Jamaica's oldest denomination cemetery on the island and one of the oldest Jewish cemeteries in the Western Hemisphere. Only the Jewish cemeteries of Recife in Brazil, 1630, Barbados, 1654, and maybe Suriname, 1666, predate Hunts Bay. It was the Jews of Port Royal that established Hunts Bay in the early 1660s across the harbor from their town. And at that time, it was very near the shoreline of the bay. Although most of the Port Royal community relocated to the capital city of Spanish Town after the 1692 earthquake, burials continued until the early mid-19th century. The last recorded burial at Hunts Bay on June 18th, 1844 was Saul Gadji, or Saul, S-A-U-L. We don't believe a tombstone exists for him. I don't know if it was built or it was just remained unbricked. So we'll go over to the west of the island. We'll go to Savannah Lamar. It's a seaport town on Jamaica's southwest coast, and seems to have had a large enough Jewish community in the 18th century, if we're to judge by the land they acquired for their cemetery and perhaps their synagogue. Or we can judge the size of the community from the 1772 letter to His Majesty's Treasury from the head of customs of the town, which I found at the National Archives at Kew in the UK 2 years ago. So this head of customs complained, "And my lords, such are the immense number of Jews in this pirate place, as well as all over the island, most of them aliens, not naturalized." But when you look at the records, a number of Jews were naturalized in the 1700s. "Enjoying, if anything, more privileges and are more insolent than most Christians, openly in their shops and stores, trafficking, weighing off goods on every Christian Sabbath day. That their numbers being so great," so sounds like a big enough community, "and many of them very opulent, I would humbly propose that they be obliged as aliens to swear allegiance to His Majesty and to pay £5. But unfortunately, we don't have much more information on this community. There's probably loads of documents in the UK that we could find and give us more history. So most of the town, and why that is too, is that most of the town was wiped out by the 1780 hurricane, actually on October 3. It was referred to as the Great Hurricane of October 3, 1780. The last burials we know of were done on this date. And here's one of the tombs, a fragment of the tombstone we found showing that date. 03 of October, 1780. And this is Isaac, who was the son of Benjamin Israel Nunez. And local residents still know the cemetery site as Jews' land. So here's another cemetery on the south coast of the island. And this was actually a very exciting find because it was known that Jews were, living in this bustling town from as early as the 1600s, late 1600s, early 1700s, but there was no knowledge of their cemetery by non-residents. It was Allison Morris, who you see right here, a sixth-generation resident and operator of the way back when Black River walking tour that led us to this discovery. While doing research in 2013, Alice found a plan, and the land is still in this shape, showing what seemed to be 3 plots of land with Jews' burial ground right here that you can hardly see. If you weren't looking carefully, you wouldn't see it. Written in tiny script. So a few months later in early 2014, I went to Black River and we went searching. Allison saw a gentleman she knew quite well, known as Maroon, and this is Maroon. And we asked him if he knew of any burial grounds on that particular road we were on. And we really didn't expect him to say yes. And next thing we know, we're in a backyard at one of the nearby houses built on what was the cemetery. And there we saw it. 3 tombstones rested on top of each other. And the very top one displayed the Kohanim hands right here. And this was Hyman Cohen. And the historian Stan Mervis tells us one of the richest, if not the richest Jew in 18th century Jamaica. Documentation of the cemetery was conducted by CB in 2015. You see us measuring one of the 2 tombstones that were discovered, other than the 3 we had seen before. Interestingly, the surname of the two sisters that occupy the land they're named Isaacs, and an early Jewish name associated with the town. Rose were still on the south coast, but a little more inland. Rose Corner was established by Rebecca Sampson in 1822 with the burial of her husband Aaron. They lived just outside of the fishing village of Alligator Pond on Jamaica's south coast. In 2012, CV counted 32 burials, and there could be a few more. The last burial was in 1894. The cemetery is on a small plateau, so you hardly see these stairs on the road. It's a side road. And when you walk up, now there's a huge tree here that we had to kind of navigate to get over. And you walk through the bush and you come up to the site. But however, it's at risk right now because farmers are encroaching. But it gives a kind of surreal feeling when you go there and to think that these souls have been buried there for over 150 years. We're moving to the North Coast now. And this is Falmouth Jewish Cemetery. It's located in the Georgian town of Falmouth on Jamaica's North Coast. And it's one of the first Jewish cemeteries where you distinctly see how assimilation is affecting the communities outside the main city areas. It's a mixed burial ground, Sephardic and Ashkenazi. Out of the Ashkenazi tend to put tombstones standing up, have vertical, and whereas the Sephardic tend to have horizontal. Out of the 113 assumed burials, there are 79 with tombstones. And out of those 79, only 13 have Hebrew on them. There is an absence of Portuguese and Spanish inscriptions. The oldest legible tombstone is 1822. You can't see it, but it's near the gate. And it's actually facing south rather than east for some reason. And that's Lazarus Solomon of Brada, Poland, whose second wife hailed from Jamaica. The last Jew buried in Falmouth died in 1944, Alfred Delgado. So we move on to Kingston now. This is the second English and German congregation cemetery, located on the eastern outskirts of the downtown area. As the name implies, this is the second of two cemeteries belonging to the Ashkenazi community. The older and smaller one, 1796, was a short distance away, but it probably reached its capacity by 1872 and sadly no longer exists. Only one tombstone from that older cemetery survived and was relocated to the Synagogue Memorial Garden. Here is an aerial view, probably taken in the 1960s, 1970s of this cemetery. So you can clearly see that less than half the land has been used, with 6 established rows. It starts, the oldest one goes there and it goes down south and then it goes up like that. And then this is the children's section right here. And this was the mortuary house, which we refer to in Jamaica as the Mater House. And here we are at Orange Street, established in 1822 and still open for burials in Kingston. It was the Spanish and Portuguese Jews, that congregation that established it first. They're old Jews, Old Kingston Jews Cemetery, which was a few blocks away on North Street, was nearly full. So with the partial amalgamation of the Sephardic and Ashkenazi communities in 1883, the land north of this Sephardic, Spanish and Portuguese ground was reserved for UCI burials. So these are burials from the United Congregation of Israelites. This is a fairly recent drone shot of the cemetery. It's on 3.5 acres of land. On the left here, this is the old section. This is the Sephardic and the Spanish and Portuguese congregation. And the first burial is right here. And this is what is left of the old brick wall that separated the two when the amalgamated congregation first established. Their first burial is right over there. And then here is our mortuary house. And then along the perimeter here, we took old stones from the North Street Cemetery and brought them here because that site was sold. And here we have a couple of them here. This is Sarah Pereira Brandon here. So at the moment, this is the only Jewish cemetery open for burial on the island. So now we'll introduce you to three individuals that have connections to New Orleans and the American South. Here we have Noel Abraham Croswell. He was born in Switzerland in 1804 and died in Jamaica in 1876. So he ended up in Jamaica in 1837, apparently fleeing Prussian authorities because of his involvement in student insurrection. And it seems to be kind of what he did throughout his life. He got involved in things like that. He set up an apothecary on King Street, the principal street for businesses to operate from in downtown Kingston. And at some point, he established connections in Haiti. So this is an obituary showing, that Noel was a pretty colorful character. In 1866, he had to wind down business. And there's an ad here showing his winding down a business because of a fiat of expulsion. He was expelled from Jamaica due to his involvement with a Haitian general taking refuge in Jamaica and his bid to overthrow the Haitian government. So what Noel's involvement was providing the general with a boat called the Oracle, but it didn't get much further than off of Jamaica's north coast. And family folklore also says that Noel was involved with the famous Morant Bay Rebellion, supporting the rebels against the government. So this rebellion, what resulted in the end was the island reverting to a crown colony, meaning direct rule from Britain instead of through a Jamaican House of Assembly, as had been done for the previous 200 years. So Noel ended up in New Orleans at the age of 61, 62, continued his cause for looking out for the disadvantaged by offering support to the freedmen through his writings. And I understand there was a big revolt around that time. A number of them were killed. And his knowledge of therapeutics brought relief to the yellow fever patients of 1867 epidemic. And then he seems to have gone to Haiti and then returned to Jamaica where he died. His son John got involved in the same sort of business, maybe expanding it more, and continued ties with Haiti for quite a while. So Noel was buried at the Second English and German Congregation Cemetery. His descendants weren't sure of the exact location of his burial until the fragments were discovered in 2015. And then these were located to the Synagogue Memorial Garden. And here it is. This is what we have. We might find more, but this is what remains at the moment. Jacob de Cordova. This might not be a name widely known, but though his descendants live on in Texas, but Jacob de Cordova is significant in terms of the early history of that state of Texas. He was born in the old capital city of Spanish Town in Jamaica, but was raised in England and Philadelphia as his mother died while giving birth to him. As a young adult, Jacob found his self back in Jamaica before leaving the island in 1836, first for New Orleans and then Texas in 1839. He formed a land agency with his half-brother Phineas, which became one of the largest in the Southwest. Then in 1848-49, he and two other partners laid out the town of Waco. So one of the founding members of Waco. It shouldn't be surprising then that he produced the first official map of Texas in 1849, and you'll see his name right here, J.D. de Cordova. Jacob was also involved in politics and other business ventures throughout his life. Before leaving Jamaica, though, Jacob and his brother Joshua started a weekly newspaper called The Gleaner in 1834. Jacob had learned the printing trade while he was in Philadelphia and took that knowledge back to the country of his birth. It is Jamaica's oldest newspaper at 191 years strong. Jacob died in 1868 and was originally buried in Kimball, Texas. His body and that of his wife was removed to the Texas State Cemetery in 1935. And the last individual I'll touch on briefly is Judah Toro. I think that name is quite well known throughout New Orleans and United States. He was a resident of New Orleans for 50 of his 79 years and was known for his philanthropy. He has synagogues, a cemetery, an infirmary, a town hall, and a university, and probably other things named after him. His connection with Jamaica is through his father, Isaac, who lived here in Jamaica at two different periods in his life and is buried in the capital city of Kingston, most likely at the Old Jew Cemetery that unfortunately no longer exists. Isaac first arrived in Jamaica from Amsterdam in, we're told, 1737, 1738. And then he went on to Newport, Rhode Island around 1760, where the Sephardic congregation was in need of a Hazan. It was during this time that Torah Synagogue was built. So why Jamaica? Well, perhaps because it had a very fairly large and vibrant Sephardic community on the island at the time, with 5 synagogues between the city of Spanish Town, Port Royal, and Kingston. There were other Toro member families on the island, but we can't say if they were connected at all, but quite possibly. When Judah's father died in 1783, his mother took the family back to New York. When I visited Torah Synagogue about 22 years ago, I knew the connection to Jamaica, but hadn't realized that Isaac was buried here. And I'm hoping one day that we can confirm where he was buried and have the appropriate plaque installed at the site. These are other Jamaican Jewish families with connections to New Orleans. We have Aaron's, Adolphus, Benjamin, Bonito, Brandon, Da Costa, Davidson, Delgado, De Azevedo, De Mesa, Henriquez. Delgado may be a little more familiar because it was the New Orleans Museum of Art was originally named the Delgado Museum of Art, which officially opened in 1911. There wasn't a name change until the 1970s. The vision of creating this museum belonged to Isaac Delgado, a Jamaican immigrant who became a wealthy sugar broker in his adopted country, gifting $150,000 towards the establishment of this institution. So we'll go on to our synagogue and community of year and today. And this is a lovely photo that I recently discovered of synagogue Shari Shalom, located at 92 Duke Street. This is Duke Street here in downtown Kingston. It was first built in 1888, rebuilt after the 1907 earthquake in 1911, replacing the original bricks with reinforced concrete, and was damaged again in 1988. And this is a more current photo of it from the south side of the building. And the feature that everyone noticed when they first entered Shari Shalom is that the floor is covered in sand, one of 5 such synagogues in the world: Curacao, Suriname, St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, and Amsterdam being the other ones with sand floors. So it's just quite impressive when you walk in there and see that. Here's our synagogue quite full. It might have been a high holiday or some other festivity. So where we are today, we are a small community, smaller than this. maybe 200, 250 at most, and a community that is proud of our heritage and how Jamaican Jews have contributed greatly to the development and growth of our island state. Once Jews obtained full civil liberties in 1831, which is some years before Jews in England and the United States, Jamaican Jews became active in all aspects of Jamaican society. They quickly became a political force in the mid-1800s, accounting for 1/6 of the House of Assembly in 1849. And their influence was such that the Assembly adjourned for Yom Kippur that year. And we have one company in Jamaica that still puts advertisements in the Gleaner, and perhaps our other newspaper, announcing that they're closed for Yom Kippur. Once Jews, our community has produced lawyers, bankers, composers, actors, artists, sportsmen and women, philanthropists. They have also held the position of Member of Parliament, Speaker of the House, Mayor, and our current leader of the opposition. His father was an English Jew, Professor Sir John Golding. They created the first Jews, our Jamaican Jews created the first comprehensively planned housing scheme, ran sugar factories, produced rum, established Jamaica's first modern pharmacies, built shipping ports, and so much more. And today we still continue to play our part in nation building. Although attendance is not high at synagogue, even for high holidays, we still conduct services Friday evenings and Saturday mornings. There has been no rabbi for a number of years, but we have a spiritual leader and lay readers that lead our services. Our children still prepare for their bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. We officially changed from Orthodox to progressive 51 years ago in 1974. This allowed women to take part in our services and to serve on the board of directors. Our current president, she demits in September, October this year, is the first female to lead the United Nation of Israelites. And here we have a bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah. Jamaica's Jewish community is coming from a high of over 2,000 in the late 1800s, but it's estimated that there are over 400 Jamaicans of Jewish descent in Jamaica and overseas, and many of these are proud of their Jewish heritage. It was predicted as far back as 1844 that Jews in Jamaica would be extinct in 5 years. So we have descendants here visiting their ancestor in Nathan in Falmouth, and then David Lindo proudly showing his great-grandfather. Here at the Orange Street Jewish Cemetery, this is Diane Lyon-Weed, one of our directors of JJCPF, and she has so many ancestors and family buried in this cemetery. And then this is Ambassador Peter Black visiting his mother, his grandmother, and his great-grandmother. And then this is the Joseph descendants of Joseph Bravo Harrow. That's my husband actually there, and Noel Croswell. So Joseph's son married Noel's granddaughter. Both Joseph and Noel are buried at the Second English and German Congregation Cemetery, but both tombstones were relocated to the synagogue's memorial garden. So, you know, that prediction of extinction, but here we are today having services celebrating not only high holidays, but other festivals, facilitating Orthodox conversions, operating Hillel School, considered one of the best learning institutions on the island, and making a positive impact on Jamaican society. The latest addition to our community happened last month with the birth of a baby girl, and we expect another addition later in the year. I mentioned my involvement in JJCPF earlier, and if anyone were to ask me what my life's purpose is, I can answer without reservation the work I do through JJCPF. This organization is integral to preserving Jamaica's Jewish sites of memory through documentation and hopefully restoration in the future. So much has been lost through natural disasters, particularly the Great Fire of 1882 that destroyed pre-8909 records for the Sephardic community and the death register of the Ashkenazi community. What is being recorded started with CVE, but as we gain access to records that still exist, we have been able to expand our knowledge and fill in some of the blanks in an effort to produce more accurate inventories. And this is very helpful for genealogical research. So in this slide, we see CV documenting the Lakovia Jewish Cemetery in 2012. It was a small town that had a large percentage of Jewish cemetery residents in the 18th century. Historical accounts claim that the cemetery is much bigger than the 9 tombstones recorded, but our ability to check has been greatly reduced as the land has been subdivided and is being sold. A house has been built right here in the bush against the tombstones that remain. This is another cemetery in Lucy. In 2014, the CBE volunteers were trying to turn over this large 18th century tombstone. It measured 7 foot by 4 foot by 6 inches. It had slipped off the base where it was located on a slope, and it's rested facing down in front of a laundromat for quite a while. It came from the older of the 2 cemeteries that had existed in the town. We weren't able to turn it over, and unfortunately, when I drove through a couple of years later, it was no longer visible. There are 3 important projects that JJCPF is working on. One is the Semify database project. We are using Semify's cemetery management software application to ensure free digital access to all work that CV and now JJCPF have done over the years. Cemetery by cemetery, we are sorting, digitizing, uploading maps, photographs, survey forms, transcribed and translated inscriptions, and any other information that might be useful to visitors on the site. So when you go on the site, you click on cemetery database, you'll come to a list of cemeteries that have been uploaded. You press on Falmouth, you go to the gravesite and look up, and then you see the burials superimposed on a Google Earth image. And then you press on the one that you're interested in. So I was interested in that one. And here we have, you go to the gravesite again, because you just come up with a name. When you press it again, you see the photos and all the information that we have on Abigail, her husband, whether he's buried there or not, but his information was on her tombstone. This is her tombstone here. And she is one of 22 children, the daughter of Alexander Lindo. And there are a number of stones, and we even have the carver's name listed in this information and other relations that are buried, because her daughter, her son, another son, and another son right here, all buried near her. A number of stones of the cemetery are carved in London, and one actually in Baltimore, Maryland, in this particular cemetery. Our other project is the name plate project, concentrated in Orange Street Cemetery, where there's been a lot of vandalism, but also in some cases, the plot was never bricked for some reason or another. We've done 55 nameplates looking like this. So we've kind of changed it slightly, the design. And this is for the 1883 burials onward. And we have another 50 to 60 go. We've just started verifying burials in the Spanish and Portuguese section, 1822 onwards, based on the death and burial register that we have access to and that survive, but we can't say at the moment how many we will need there. And then the last thing that we're really hoping to get is at least some ground penetrating radar. We feel that access to GPR is an important tool to help us determine if there are unknown burials in our cemeteries, particularly Hunts Bay, Savannah Lamar, and Lakovia. We brought down a really fabulous GPR technician last year, and earlier this year. And the one machine we knew of was not working, but we still took it out, and he was able to demonstrate how it should be used from persons from the Jamaica National Heritage Trust and some archaeology students. Next year, we're hoping to bring him back along with his equipment. And with that, I've come to the end of the talk, and I hope you found it enlightening and given an idea of, our what's happening in our historic community. There's so many more stories to share and just as many to be uncovered. Thank you.
Thank you. I know if we were in a room together, we would hear applause right now. I'm sure everybody's applauding from their own home. And I did see some questions come in through the chat. So thank you so much for sharing. And let's get started with the first one. But as folks are thinking of more questions, pop them in the chat and I'll read them. So this first one is from David Simon, and it's I think personal to him, and we can widen it out as well. So he says he's visited Kingston in Spanish Township in 2014 as part of his wife's family genealogy, and they spent a lot of time with Ainsley Enriquez. His wife's ancestors are the Conde de, or
Yeah,
the
de
Conde
Azevedo.
de Acevedo, Pereira
Yeah.
Mendez, De Leon, Moraes, and others. Seems like a lot of folks. Um, and they visited the bureau that holds wills and found a significant run from 1834. In London next month, they're going to visit the UK archives and are going to examine some papers from newspapers from 1803 to 1815, and they're looking for evidence of Conde de Acevedo, arrival from London. Is there a good place that you know of any of these records or specific period connected to help connect these family dots? So it's a very specific genealogy store question.
Right. There's the Jewish Genealogical Society in the UK that could have information. There's actually, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but someone had put me onto him after another talk who's descended from a De Azevedo. There's another, my colleague Diane, I believe, has De Azevedo in her family as well. She's here in this, but there is some information. I think they're trying to find out when the first one came, but there was a number of them. And I believe Rebecca Sampson from Rose Corner, I believe she was a De Azevedo as well. So, but I would say other than where he's going to, the Jewish Genealogical Society in the UK would be the best one. I could look up an email and send it to you, Lizzie, for them,
Yeah,
because they just moved. They had a little library and they've moved. So, because I went to them 2 years ago, and I believe you need to set up an appointment.
awesome. And actually, one of the questions that's come in twice now is how did we contact you? And that's one I can answer. There will be a follow-up email, and I will
Right.
send out Marina's email address in
Right.
that as well. Um, Another question came in that I hope you'll be able to answer about the Lacovia Cemetery. Did Barnett copy the graves at Lacovia Cemetery?
They wrote down what they found. They didn't do translations. And the book was published quite a number of years after they visited. I'm not sure where we thought some of the original documents were at our National Library, but it might be in Israel.
Mm,
Yeah, so they didn't, yeah. Yeah, the Hebrew inscriptions were not transcribed, unfortunately. So I don't even know if there's any photos because some of the ones that survive, I think there's two missing at the moment when we went there last year. So if there's photos, there's supposed to be photos. We've gone to the National Library where they should have been deposited and we haven't been able to find them.
mm,
So hopefully we can do some more digging in the future and find them.
absolutely. So you mentioned a lot of cemetery preservation. Are there other non-Jewish communities in Jamaica doing cemetery preservation work? And do y'all ever connect and work together in that?
The Chinese have done that, but I mean, because we haven't been doing restoration. We're just working with preservation at the moment. I mean, restoration, hopefully once we raise funds or get descendants of these people buried here to contribute, like through JJCPF, to it, and once they indicate that this is where something must go to. But it's something that we do, you know, hopefully start before even all the documentation is completed. But the only other one I really realize, maybe some personal persons do it in church, like the Anglicans tend to bury, if they're not in a public cemetery, they tend to be buried in church graveyards, but most of those are full now. But the Chinese recently, they've been in Jamaica officially, I believe I always forget, it's either 1845 or 1854, but they have a cemetery that they've recently cleaned back up and tried to maintain. And probably have done some restoration on it. I think Diane went there recently too, earlier this year. So she's on here. But I would think Chinese are the ones that stick out most for me.
Mm. Another question on cemetery preservation. You mentioned that there are houses that are like being encroached on Jewish cemeteries. How common is this, and how do you combat or manage, more recent uses of the land that
Yeah, it's very hard because, the communities outer side of Kingston, they just established I guess when they established their cemetery, they wouldn't dream that somebody would be building on top of it. Um, and um, and some of the community, truthfully, when you're not brought up learning this part of your history, because it's limited and you just and the information wasn't passed on for one reason or another. For some people, yes, for some people, no. And it's not taught in our schools. So it's difficult. We try what we can. There's only a few cemeteries that still belong to the community. It was tried, I think in the 1940s, there was a move to try and get titles for these cemeteries in order to protect them. But it gets very difficult, especially as, people have been squatting on them for 100 years or so, but Lokovia one was a little disappointing because, from 2012 to see that it was still in bush and protected to an extent, but the family members of the lady that owned it must have decided they needed to sell, and you can't, what do you do?
Mm.
We've talked to the lady at the one in Lokovia, and she says she talks to them and she's happy with them there because there was consideration of removing them to the synagogue memorial garden. But she seems all right with them. So we try and keep in touch with her on a regular basis. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to do, and if you don't have someone that can help you look after them, or it's now on property that belongs to someone else, there's not much you can do.
Thanks. Another question came in. Is there much connection between plantations in Jamaica and those in Louisiana? I don't know if this person is specifically thinking about sugar plantations, but that's what came to my mind.
I
Yeah.
I would think so. My colleague Tony Pittock has done. She's based in Philadelphia. She's done a lot of merchant connections between Philly and the Caribbean and Jamaica, and I don't think Louisiana and New Orleans would be any different. As you know, I mentioned Isaac Delgado made his money as a sugar broker. So he must have seen that opportunity. So I would guess he would have got because Louisiana wasn't a part of the US till what, to like 1830s or so. Was that correct?
1804. I want to say
Or
1804, but don't
a
somebody
little
look.
earlier. I think it's
Yeah.
Texas that came a little later. Yeah. So maybe when that opened up, maybe when it became a part of the US, it was just easier to go and visit and make use of the opportunities.
And somebody else mentioned Jamaican painter Isaac Mendez
Oh,
Bilsario.
yes. See, we consider him our first official Jamaican artist.
Hmm.
And we have a number of his original paintings in the National Gallery at Jamaica. He died in England. I don't think he was so well, and but unfortunately, the Novo Cemetery in London, the university there bought a large, I'd say about 2/3 of the unit of the Novo Cemetery, which is the oldest Sephardic cemetery. I think maybe the oldest Jewish cemetery in the UK. And they got rid of they exhumed, I guess, the bodies and put them in Exeter, I believe it is. I don't know what happened to the tombstones. It doesn't look like the tombstones were survive. So I think they removed like 7 or 8,000, and he was one of them. So there's only tombstones there from 1850 onwards. So that part of our connection with him, but he's still very much part of our culture, our art, and is still recognized and is so but very important part of Jamaican culture.
In Jamaica today, how much Jewish history is taught, or is it not taught? Like, do students know?
It's not taught.
Okay.
It's used as a part of the religious curriculum. So you'll have students visiting, to learn that part, versus Baptists, Anglicans, Roman Catholics. There is one lady that I met and I assisted when she was doing her master's study on Falmouth. And she's a teacher, and she just felt it's so important that it be taught in the schools in more depth. When I went to do, when I, one of the reasons the Eccles Center awarded me the fellowship 2 years ago is that, I mean, one of the things I want to do is try to incorporate, because this history is so marginalized, I want these gaps to be filled. I mean, I'm not going to finish it, but someone will finish it at some point. So I just have to continue what I'm doing, and we fill in those gaps as much as we can. And we hope that people include it. If it's not at the, secondary school level, then hopefully the tertiary, level, that people will find it important to learn.
Continuing on this trend of of what's happening in Jamaica today with the Jewish community, what, if any, is there a relationship between Jamaica and Israel?
Um, I'm not sure of to tell you the truth, the official relationship. I mean, we have diplomatic relations, Jamaica. The community, you know, after the October 3, we stand by Israel, the majority of the community. Even though it is difficult, there has been anti-Semitism because of that. They're supporters of Palestine, putting up anti-Semitic stuff, which hasn't been seen for a long time, you know, in our graveyard at Orange Street.
Mm.
There's ties. I mean, we're as any Jew in, throughout the world, there is that tie that everyone feels, even though there may be disagreements with what might be or how things are being done.
Mm. I have I'm looking at the time and I realize I have time for one more question.
Okay.
And so the question I like to ask is, what is your hope? What do you hope somebody takes the like banner of Jamaican Jewish history for? Like, you're starting this. What do you think? What do you hope the next person gains from your work or gets to add?
That this is an important history to document and to share, and that it shouldn't be disregarded. And Jamaica's motto is "Out of many, one people," and people need to realize how much they have contributed to the formation, of our nation state. It's a lot more than they realize. And even before slavery was abolished, there would be a Sunday market for the enslaved population. But guess who was open on Sundays to support them to purchase items with their, new income? It was only the Jews. And when emancipation occurred and full civil liberties for Jews, I mean, they supported each other, you know?
Mm, amazing.
So, I mean, there's just so much. I just want it to get out there more, and there not to be, um, if there's any untruths about our community, that we can clarify and produce more information, produce books and journal articles, and do more of these presentations, which is one of the things I said when, Echo Center asked me. I said, well, this is one of the things I would be wanting to be doing a presentation here to people who are a little unfamiliar, because there's so many people that come to Jamaica that cannot believe that there's a Jewish community here. They're
Mm.
just flabbergasted, and I've had many at Falmouth Cemetery where I've done tours and continue on request. I don't really market it right now, but I'll be getting help from another board member. But I mean, they've been so emotional when they get there. Such an emotional. I've had groups of rabbis there that argue over certain things as rabbis do, but they've been great. And one rabbi returned to Jamaica and brought a donation for the cemetery, which I was able to use to actually clean up another one.
Mm.
So there's just so much, and I've just touched on a tiny bit of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. And I also want to bring attention to all the places you're directing folks to learn more um,
Yes,
as a way to support your work. We'll be
yes,
adding links to those in a follow-up email, but make sure to
great.
keep following Marina's work, y'all. And Marina and the community's work. Because yeah, just
And
like
any donations to our effort goes through JJCPF.
Awesome. And that's the link I'll put at the top of the email.
Right.
Um, um, so I want to thank everybody for being here today. My last little few announcements. This is just the first in our three-part series, Sit a Spell, our virtual summer lecture series. Um, Join us next week for the Secret Life of Southern Jewish Baseball Players, Southern Jews in Baseball, with Dr. Peter Dreyer, and the following week with learning about Elizabeth Brandon, the unsung hero of Cajun Creole folklore, with Dr. Nathan Rabliss. Set a recording for today's presentation will be made available. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, stay dry if you're here in the Louisiana area. And if you're not, enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you so much, Marina. We appreciate y'all. We appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.